Criminology is a true crime podcast that may contain discussion about violent or disturbing topics. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 340 of the Criminology podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson.
And this is Mike Morford.
Mr. Morford, how are you doing in this new year of 2025?
I'm doing good. I've enjoyed a little downtime here over the holidays, spent time with the family and relaxed, and I'm ready to jump back into the swing of things for 2025. How about you?
Yeah, same here. I mean, the week off was nice. Really get to recharge the batteries, spend a lot of quality time with family. So it was really good. My wife and I were talking the other day about, I guess, being younger back in the 80s. And you think about it flipping to 1980 when you're in elementary school. And then you think about how far away 2025 would be at that point in time. I mean, you think more in the 80s, 90s, they were setting futuristic sci-fi movies at this point in time. And here we are. But of course, they had flying cars and, robots, all kinds of really futuristic stuff. It's just hard to believe it's 2025, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, the older you get, the faster it goes by too. So.
Well, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. Lynn Davis jumped out at our highest level. We had Rosa Escada Solis, Ann Anderson, and Brandon Holland. So that's a lot of great new support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much to everybody that supports us on Patreon. It means a lot to us. For anyone else that would like to, you could head over to patreon.com/criminology to get started.
All right, so we're jumping right into our first case of 2025. And we ended 2024 talking about the disappearance of Hannah Kobayashi. Just to quickly recap, she failed to catch a scheduled connecting flight from LAX to New York. And in the days after, she sent a few cryptic texts about being hacked and stripped of her identity. Then she went completely off the grid, and her family feared the worst. Fortunately for Hannah and her family, she was fine. She hadn't been abducted, trafficked, or killed. It seems like she just wanted to disconnect a bit and had a family that cared about her who wasn't exactly in the loop. We thought the recent developments regarding the missing persons case of Ryan Borgwardt would be an interesting contrast to the events that unfolded during the search for Hannah Kobayashi. Ryan Borgwardt basically did what some people have accused Hannah and her family of doing: misleading the public and authorities, wasting important resources, and potentially damaging future searches for people who are legitimately missing and endangered.
On August 11, 2024, Ryan and his family went to church just like they did on any other Sunday. Afterward, the 44-year-old father of three drove the 50-something miles from their home in Watertown, Wisconsin, to Big Green Lake in Green Lake, Wisconsin, where he planned to go fishing using his kayak. The last time his wife Emily heard from her husband was at 10:49 p.m., when he sent her a text to inform her he would soon be on his way back to the shore. When he didn't return, it worried Emily. She reported him missing on August 12th. Authorities went to Big Green Lake to start their search. Ryan's van and the trailer used to transport the kayak were still at Dodge Memorial Park, near the boat launch there. His kayak was found in the lake upside down, with a life preserver still attached to it. Green Lake is known for its depth. In fact, it's one of the deepest inland lakes in the entire state of Wisconsin. The part of the lake where they located the kayak was more than 200 feet deep. This didn't look good for Ryan. Obviously, it appeared that his kayak had capsized, and he wasn't able to get to the life preserver. First responders worried that they would be doing recovery and not a rescue.
So, Morph, I know you do a little bit of fishing, right?
Yeah, I do some fishing close to where we were at, but I definitely don't go out in any kayaks.
Well, yeah, down in Florida, I don't think you want to be kayaking too much around, alligators and things like that. I have never fished from a kayak, but I've seen it on YouTube. It looks like a lot of fun. It also looks like a lot of work, to be honest with you. But, I did want to kind of talk about this lake. You think about the depth of a lake, 200 feet, that's pretty, that's a pretty deep lake compared to what I'm used to. Most of the lakes that I fish are, maybe 40 feet deep at their deepest parts, but there are some really big lakes out there.
Yeah, I think when somebody goes missing on a lake like that with that kind of depth, you've got a whole special set of circumstances you have to think about. Maybe divers, what kind of divers are qualified to jump in there and look around, and what are the challenges of finding somebody missing in that kind of water?
For weeks, authorities and volunteers scoured the lake in search of Ryan's body. Dive teams, sonar, underwater drones, air support, and multiple canines were deployed. While they did not find Ryan, they did recover his fishing pole and his tackle box, which had his driver's license, wallet, and keys inside. They knew it was his fishing pole because his wife positively identified it for them. This all backed up the idea that he had likely drowned in the lake. Investigators were undeterred by the passing of time and the difficulty of searching the lake. They feared that Ryan was dead, but they were determined to find his body. The community and Ryan's family were also convinced that he was dead. According to People magazine, his wife, Emily, wrote online, "While I will never understand why God had to take Ryan home way sooner than I would have liked, I will be forever at peace, knowing that he's enjoying heaven with his Savior." And Morf, you and I have done a lot of cases that involved searches, searching for missing people, searching for people who, are thought to be dead, searching for their bodies. It never fails to amaze me how many people, come out, volunteer their time. Obviously, you're going to have the authorities involved. I mean, they get paid to do that. But there are a lot of people who volunteer, their time freely. And it is absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah, I think we all know about the police and the tools they have, the resources they have. But one thing that always seems to come into play in these kind of searches are just the sheer amount of people volunteering their time and energy. And sometimes they don't even know the person they're looking for. They just want to help a family out. So it was clearly a group effort here. And in the eyes of the family and law enforcement, they were looking to recover his body, and they thought he was dead.
But you can understand why people would think that. You have a capsized kayak, there's a fishing pole, his wallet, driver's license, keys, all of that stuff. The scene would make pretty much everyone lean towards that conclusion.
And had this been like a very shallow bit of water, something not very wide, maybe 10, 12 feet deep, if they didn't find his body under those conditions, you might think, hey, what's going on here? This doesn't seem like everything meets the eye. But here in this 200 feet deep water is a little bit more of a possibility that, that they weren't finding his body due to the depth of it. Sometime in early October, the search for Ryan came to a sudden stop. It was discovered that on August 13th, the day after Emily reported Ryan missing, his name was searched by Border Patrol in the Canadian law enforcement database. This information really changed everything for those involved in the case. It changed the entire scope of the investigation, and it changed reality for Ryan's family. Green Lake County Sheriff Mark Podol, who was in charge of the search for Ryan, told People magazine, "That was something we didn't expect." Authorities stopped focusing on the lake since it seemed there was proof that Ryan was still alive, and they began to look at his actions in the days before his disappearance. Ryan's wife, Emily, provided investigators with his laptop, and a digital forensic analysis was performed.
Looking into his online activity, it became clear that Ryan had hatched a plan to fake his own death, and it seemed to work. Authorities were so convinced he was in the lake that, they searched it for weeks. It's likely that if he had just stayed in the country somehow or avoided having his name run through an official database, he would have continued to get away with it. His passport being used was pretty good proof that he was not dead in that lake. There was one issue, though. They hadn't been looking into the possibility that he faked his own death because his driver's license, phone, and passport were all left behind. They found the passport at home, where it should have been. Police were puzzled. How could he possibly start over without any of this? This led investigators to discover that Ryan had a second passport. In the spring, he falsely reported that his passport had been lost or stolen so he could obtain his second secret passport, which was issued to him on May 22nd, less than 3 months earlier.
Ryan had apparently been planning this for quite some time. In January 2024, he secretly took out a $375,000 life insurance policy on himself, with his family members listed as beneficiaries, though no one ever attempted to cash in this policy. By the time of his disappearance, Ryan had secretly racked up thousands of dollars in credit card debt, and his wife would still be on the hook for the payments. It's possible he felt that the life insurance money could cover anything he left her on her own to pay. Ryan had even opened a foreign bank account and began to transfer money to it so that he would have funds that wouldn't trigger any activity on his known cards or accounts. At some point, he started squirreling away cash and took $5,500 in cash with him when he disappeared. He also purchased gift cards for airline tickets.
A few weeks before faking his death, Ryan secretly bought an e-bike. Ryan was self-employed. He owned his own woodworking business. To hide the e-bike from Emily, he kept it at his woodworking shop instead of bringing it home. When he loaded it up into his van, he made sure to back it up in such a way that the security cameras there wouldn't capture the bike at all. The day he disappeared, Ryan changed the email addresses linked to his bank accounts. And just before leaving for Green Lake, he cleared his browser history. He had also at some point replaced the entire hard drive in his laptop in an attempt to cover his tracks. This didn't stop investigators from following his digital trail because the day he left for his new life, he also synced his laptop to his iCloud account and apparently ended up accidentally backing everything up on the new hard drive. So, Morf, I think we need to take a second here and just kind of talk about all of the different things that Ryan did before he went missing. I mean, obviously, this was something that he had been thinking about. This was not a spur of the moment decision. The filing for a new passport, opening foreign bank accounts, buying this electric bike, replacing your hard drive, trying to get rid of your digital footprint. I mean, there was a lot that went in to his planning.
And the whole time we're talking about these details, it made me think for a second, had this happened in, say, the 1970s or 80s before there were, so much of a digital trail and clues to work with, would this have been something he easily would have gotten away with? There would probably be no way to track all this stuff and connect all these dots. So, sometimes the lack of technology hurts in solving crimes, older crimes, but in newer crimes here, or newer cases that we talk about, at least, sometimes in newer cases that we talk about, having that technology at investigators' fingertips can help provide answers.
But like we see in many cases, right? No matter how much planning someone does, it can be hard to get everything right. You think about this replacement of the hard drive and then the kind of debacle with the iCloud account. I don't really understand how the cloud works, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm showing my age there. I mean, I back stuff up to the cloud, but I don't always realize, when it's happening or how to turn it off or all of the ramifications to it. It kind of goes back to your point, right? This new technology. Does everybody fully understand what they're doing, what, authorities are able to access, and It's always changing. So to that point, people are going to continue to make mistakes, which is a good thing because it sometimes leads to helping the authorities to solve some of these cases.
And it just shows that as much as somebody can plan, there's always things they don't think about. Even something like the passport being flagged, it seems like he probably, if he had been able to start a new identity somehow with an all new passport, that was the clue that got them on the path to finding out he wasn't dead. But instead he chose to use the same name and got a replacement passport. And had that not happened, he might have gotten away with this. Investigators were able to find that Ryan was in close communication with a woman from Uzbekistan, and at least one photo of her was recovered from the laptop. There was a file on his computer titled Promise. It contained the plans he was making with the woman from Uzbekistan, and it detailed how they would begin their new life together. Authorities were able to make contact with Ryan on November 11th. It's been reported that they found him through a Russian-speaking woman. According to ABC News, they sent him an email that made his heart hit the floor, and he answered it. Inside the email from authorities, there was a photo of the woman that had been taken from his own laptop. This caused Ryan to realize that investigators knew everything.
Ryan deliberately left his laptop behind because it would have been a red flag if he took it on his fishing trip with him. In today's world, it holds a lot of weight to see technology left behind. When you walk away from your phone and computer, you're essentially walking away from everything. Yeah, you can log into things using passwords, but many times you still have to verify that it's you using that password by being texted a code. He knew that no one would buy the debt if it didn't look like he left everything behind. But obviously, what authorities found on that technology was what ultimately doomed him. Now, they not only knew he was alive, but they knew who he was with. At the request of authorities, Ryan filmed a video of himself to prove that it was really him speaking to investigators. According to CNN, in the video, Ryan said, "I am in my apartment. I am safe, secure, no problem." While this did confirm that he was alive and that he had faked his own death, Ryan refused to reveal his location, and he was adamant that he would not be returning to the United States. He expressed to investigators that he was hesitant to come home because he feared that no one will accept him. And I think it's very understandable, Morf, that he would fear this. You think about what he had done to his family, to his friends, to everyone who knew him. You're essentially saying, I don't want to be around you anymore. And I'm okay with you thinking that I'm now dead.
Yeah, I think to a lot of people, that's very cowardice. He doesn't have the respect and ability to be honest with his wife and children and just tell them the truth. Instead, he has to come up with this elaborate plan instead of just saying, I'm not happy anymore. I want to leave. I want to start my life over. And he didn't do that. So I think that's what probably has a lot of people so interested in this case, that he could go through all these steps to try and avoid doing that. According to CNN, Ryan Borgwardt's family was very emotional upon learning the news that Ryan was alive. Normally that would be amazing news, but the fact he had decided to leave them and lie to them overshadowed the joy of learning that he hadn't drowned. Just the added level of confusion and hurt would probably be overwhelming for them to deal with. The news even affected those who had spent countless hours searching for him. Keith Cormican, who runs Bruce's Legacy, a volunteer organization providing search and recovery operations for drowned victims, told the AP News, "You meet all kinds in the world, and I guess this guy went to the extremes, faking his disappearance. So it's a first." Cormican is just one of the many people who searched for Ryan for weeks. The search took a personal toll on his self-esteem. He told CNN, "My success rate is pretty good." And he added, "To not be able to find him really had me questioning my abilities, and I lost a lot of sleep over it."
Authorities continued to speak with Ryan, and they tried to coax him into coming home. Sheriff Pottle told CNN, Christmas is coming, and what better gift he could give his kids than to be there for Christmas with them. Despite what he had said earlier about having no intention to return, Ryan wound up flying back to the U.S. on December 10th. Once back in the United States, Ryan Borgwardt turned himself in. At the Green Lake County Government Center, he was arrested and charged with one count of obstructing an officer. This is a misdemeanor charge, stemming from the actions he took to make investigators believe he had drowned. Though faking your own death is not technically illegal, deliberately misleading authorities during the course of an investigation is. His actions were specifically intended to launch a needless investigation, though I'm sure he probably didn't think it was going to end up being as large of an investigation as it ended up being. He faces up to 9 months in prison, a fee up to $10,000 or both. Since none of his family members had tried to collect his life insurance, it's unclear whether he can be charged with felony insurance fraud.
Extraditing Ryan from another country over a misdemeanor charge may have posed a challenge to investigators, and this is likely why they were kind to him and tried to appeal to his emotions when they were corresponding, rather than focusing on the criminal or justice aspect. It could have spooked him, and then there would have been nothing they could do. Authorities are also seeking restitution for the money spent searching for him. This $40,000 maximum fee only includes the taxpayer-funded services and wouldn't provide any reimbursement to Bruce's legacy. In just the first 2 weeks of the search, the organization spent $10,000, which includes some damaged equipment they will need to repair or replace before they can help with another search.
Ryan apparently never gave a thought to these volunteers when he hatched his plan because, according to him, he had no idea that organizations like Bruce's Legacy even existed, let alone that they would be involved in the search for his body. According to Sheriff Pottle in a CNN interview, Ryan does feel bad about the amount of hours that people spent searching for him. He figured that the police would quickly come to the conclusion that he drowned in the lake and it was just too deep and large to find his body. Then they would stop looking for him. 1 week, maybe 2 weeks of a search, max. But that's not what happened here. They continued to search for him for months. Sheriff Pottle told NPR.org he didn't expect us to go more than 2 weeks in searching for him. Well, I hate to tell you, you picked the wrong sheriff and the wrong department.
So I'm thinking about everything Ryan did here and the ripple effects it had and could have had. For example, this organization is there to help try and save him or recover his body as a worst case scenario. And they wound up having damaged equipment. So now it affects the next family who they want to go out and help because they can't help until they get that equipment replaced or repaired. So, I don't think Ryan thought about, the chain reaction this could have, or what if one of these divers or one of the volunteers on the search had some kind of medical emergency while they were searching and died out in the lake. Things like that could be direct results of what he had set in motion.
Well, and I think it's something we talked about before. You think of it like a spider web. The actions of someone have so many different effects and it just kind of radiates out. And I'm sure he didn't think about really any of it.
And my thinking is if he didn't think about the feelings of his own wife or children, that he could do this to them, then he probably most certainly wasn't thinking about anybody else that would be, out trying to recover him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, if you can do what Ryan did to your family, then, you can do just about anything and not really care about people outside your family, I'm sure.
According to CNN, Ryan told investigators, everything hinged on me dying in a lake. His plan was for people to believe he was dead so that they wouldn't look for him, not for a huge search to start. This is why he used the lake instead of just parking his car somewhere and walking off. The whole idea was to sell the death. Ryan has admitted much of how he pulled off faking his death. He told investigators that he had been doing research on how to pull this off, including looking up cases of other people who faked their own deaths and figuring out which lake was the deepest near him. He also looked up how deep a body would have to be underwater for it to sink, rather than eventually float. This is why he settled on Big Green Lake. It fit all the criteria.
Ryan put the full plan in motion on the Thursday or Friday before his disappearance, He planned his trip for a night that looked best in terms of weather, since he knew he would be wet and the wind on him would be chilling. Ryan didn't really want to drown in the lake, so he went to Walmart to try and purchase a life vest. But they just happened to be out of them that day, so he went without one. He did have the life preserver on the kayak, but leaving that behind was a big part of his plan. At Walmart, he did buy a backpack and a UW Oshkosh hat. Of course, he was never actually going fishing. Instead, he took his kayak out onto Big Green Lake until he got to what he felt was the deepest area, and then started inflating a children's boat he brought with him. Once that was inflated, he turned his kayak upside down and dropped his phone and tackle box in the water. He then went back to shore in the inflatable boat where he had an e-bike stashed in the tree line.
Ryan's plan almost fell apart at the lake. When he tried to get out of the water, he ended up in mud and muck up to his waist. As he tried to cross the road, he realized he was leaving muddy footprints emerging from the lake and heading straight to where his van was parked. He attempted to cover his tracks by washing the footprints off the road, but after just 2, he gave up and continued with his plan. Luckily for him, investigators did not find these prints when they searched the area. Because it was so dark and he hadn't had the bike for long, Ryan had trouble figuring out how to turn it on. He manually pedaled it for a bit before he was able to get it powered up. He then used that bike to ride about 80 miles to Dutch Mill Park and Ride in Madison, Wisconsin. He threw away the inflatable raft and his dirty clothes and left the e-bike before continuing on his way.
Now, this is a 6, almost 7-hour bike ride, according to Google Maps. Just imagine, if Ryan couldn't get the bike started or the battery had died, this 7-hour trip could be done faster if you're riding at your top speed constantly. And I'm sure there was adrenaline from hoping that, he wouldn't get caught. That would be helpful for speeding up the ride, but it was still quite the trek. If anything went wrong with the bike, he was on his own. No matter how fast he was able to get from Green Lake to Madison, it shows extreme forethought and dedication. It was such a long bike ride that Ryan needed to change the battery during the trip. He had thought of that possibility and planned for it, bringing along an extra one. Despite planning for good weather, he still had to stop and change his wet shoes and pants on the way to Madison because he got so cold while he was riding the bike.
It's possible that Ryan planned to take a break sometime overnight, and he didn't set out thinking he would need to ride through the night. He told investigators that after he went to Walmart, but prior to going to Big Green Lake, he went to the home of a friend he thought was away to try and gather stove pellets. If he was planning to ride his bike straight to a bus station without stopping, it's uncertain what those stove pellets would have been used for. Perhaps if Ryan figured out he would be wet and cold, he could find somewhere to hunker down for a bit and change his clothes, warm up, maybe even cook something. Then that makes more sense.
By 5 a.m., when he knew his wife would be waking up as she normally did, Ryan felt that there was no turning back. From Madison, he took a Greyhound bus to Milwaukee, where he caught another bus to Chicago, Illinois. From Chicago, he took a bus to Detroit, Michigan. At a minimum, direct from Madison to Detroit, this is a 10-hour trip, and it would have been much longer with these connecting routes. From Detroit, he took another bus that crossed the Canadian border, using the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. According to ABC News, once Ryan was in Canada, Border Patrol agents were suspicious. Due to his lack of driver's license or any booked travel plans, they took him aside for questioning, and this is when his name was entered into their law enforcement databases. The phone he had, likely a burner phone, wasn't working, and he couldn't get it to unlock, which made them even more suspicious of him. With no criminal history, he was allowed to enter the country. He went straight to the airport in Toronto. There, he caught a flight to Paris, France. During that flight, he saw the headlines about his disappearance and figured he had gotten away with it all.
Once he landed in France, Ryan booked another flight to a country in Eastern Europe or somewhere in Asia. Authorities haven't specified, but it seems highly likely that he flew to Uzbekistan or Georgia. He was picked up from the airport by a woman who then spent several days in a hotel room with him. Authorities have not clarified whether this woman, was the previously mentioned woman from Uzbekistan, but it makes sense to assume that it's the same woman. After a few days in the hotel with the unknown woman, Ryan started living in Georgia. Articles and reports note that he took up residency, but nothing specific is detailed. When he was living in Georgia, he tried to follow the news about the search for him back in the States, but he was also careful not to be detected. He mostly avoided clicking on any articles, and instead stuck to reading headlines. When he did click, though, he made sure he was using a VPN that placed him in countries other than Georgia. Ryan thought that if authorities figuring out that he was still alive was inevitable, as it must have seemed when the search for him just kept going, he could at least keep them from finding his current location.
On Thursday, December 12, 2024, Emily Borgwardt filed for a legal separation because their marriage, according to AP News, was irretrievably broken. In her eyes, they had been married for 22 years. In the state of Wisconsin, now obviously a legal separation is different than a divorce filing. With a separation, the couple remains legally married, but a judge will still rule on issues like assets and custody, like in a divorce case. Emily is asking the court for sole custody of their 3 teenage children. 2 of them are in high school, and the youngest is in middle school. The AP News article that first discussed this development mentions that there are no further details in the document, but for Ryan to do all of this to get away from his wife, it seems clear that their marriage was indeed broken beyond repair. When your husband fakes his own death to have an affair and leaves you and the 3 children you shared to grieve for him and try to navigate life alone, it's pretty hard to imagine that there would ever be trust or respect in that relationship again. And we don't know exactly, what the state of their relationship was before Ryan left, but obviously, Morf, after he did what he did, that marriage is going to be broken. I think it's pretty hard to come back from something like that.
It seemed like for Emily, it definitely was, and she wasn't having any second thoughts. She was viewing this as a way to end the marriage.
Well, I think for most, that would be a deal breaker. You're going to fake your death to go live your life with a woman in Europe and make us all think you're dead. Not taking you back after that one.
And this isn't just a case of a husband tiring of the marriage with his wife and walking away from it. Divorces and breakups happen all the time. But in this situation, Ryan also walked away from his children with the intent to make them think he was dead. It seems like it may be hard for the kids to repair the relationship, too, with their father. I mean, after all, could you really look up to your dad after this, knowing he very intentionally decided and planned to hurt you and your family? At the same time, when a loved one passes, we all want just 5 more minutes with that person, one more hug, one more opportunity to say what you left unsaid. We'd give anything to get that person back for any amount of time. This family thought they lost Ryan. They were presented with his belongings to identify, and they mourned him for months. The level of betrayal here on Ryan's part is incredible.
It's obvious that Ryan knew what he was doing was wrong. You mentioned it more. Plenty of people leave their partners. People even abandon their families. There's that stereotype of a father going out for milk and never coming back for some reason. The stereotype is not that he faked his death and flew overseas to meet his online girlfriend. Ryan wanted to be free of his family and not have anyone look at him in a negative light. We see this very often in the true crime world, and I guess all we can do here is be happy that he thought he could get away with faking his own death. I mean, all too often, some of these men that want to be free of their families resort to violence to reach that goal. And you think about Chris Watts, Jeffrey McDonald, John List, Ronald DeFeo Jr. These were all family annihilators. And the list could go on and on. While Ryan's actions were hurtful and deceitful, it is a relief that we can say he still has a family to face in the wake of his actions.
So now we know how Ryan did what he did, but the big question many are still asking is, why? Aside from seeing another woman, we don't know why Ryan decided to fake his own death. According to Sheriff Pottle in an NPR.org interview, Ryan gave a number of reasons for his actions, adding that he just had personal matters going on and he thought this was the right thing to do. We also don't know exactly why Ryan decided to come back to the United States, though Sheriff Pottle admitted that investigators had been pulling at his heartstrings and telling him that he could still clean up the mess that he had created. Sheriff Pottle told Fox 6 Now that the public may never know why Ryan decided to come home, and that's something that's going to be up to him someday. We're not going to release that.
We don't know how things went with the woman Ryan met overseas, and $5,500 couldn't have lasted him very long, especially with multiple international flights and having to pay for hotel rooms. He could have come home to make amends and own up to what he did, but he also could have just run out of other options. In the proof of life video he sent to investigators, Ryan looks very down. The fact that he started living in Georgia, not Uzbekistan, is also odd if he went there to be with the woman. There are rumors that he may have been catfished by someone and that the woman was a decoy or a lure. She did take an hour to pick him up from the airport, so maybe she never expected that he would actually show up there in person.
There's one additional detail that may not even be Ryan, but it's interesting. There's a video clip online of a man riding a bike in San Diego who stops to talk to a young woman holding a sign that says, "Ask me for free advice." The man asked her if he should go to Uzbekistan or if he should stay with his family. When the woman asked him what would be in Uzbekistan for him, he said he wanted to meet a woman and talked about being unhappy in his marriage. While the man does resemble Ryan, it's hard to tell if it's him. Seeing the hairline would really be helpful. Unfortunately, this man was wearing a beanie that managed to cover all of it. It would be even more compelling if the video had been filmed in Wisconsin, not California. And authorities involved in the investigation into his disappearance did watch this video, and they did not believe that it was Ryan. But what a huge coincidence. Uzbekistan for a woman, cycling, unhappy marriage, those are all elements of this case, and we do know that Ryan was planning this for at least a few months. The video is from June of 2023 or 2024, so it fits in with the timeline of Ryan hatching this plan.
Yeah, like you said, Morf, we don't know if this is Ryan or not, but it's such a strange thing. I mean, what are the odds that a random person is riding a bike, asks this woman if he should go to Uzbekistan to be with a woman, and is unhappy with his marriage? If it's not Ryan, it's the weirdest coincidence ever.
And does that mean some other guy out there is planning something similar to what Ryan did for a similar situation?
Or a lot of men are being catfished by women from Uzbekistan. I don't know. One interesting thing to note in this case is that investigators are concerned that they can't provide any help or protection to the woman Ryan was with. The question is, why would authorities in the U.S. be worried about protecting a woman from overseas who seemingly entered into a relationship with Ryan? It's not clear what or who they would want to protect her from. Sheriff Pottle seems like a very empathetic person, and it's possible that he's concerned that she will face judgment in her community since this made such big news. They're being pretty careful not to reveal her identity so far, and it seems deliberate.
Ryan, who's now 45, has been released on bail. He didn't have to pay any percentage of the $500 signature bond that was issued because this type of bond only requires a promise that he will appear. If he does, he won't owe any money to the court. It's interesting that he was released on his own recognizance because this is generally only used when the person is facing minor charges and poses no flight risk. Ryan's crime involved leaving the country, so he clearly seems like a flight risk, although he did have to surrender his passport as a condition of his release. Hopefully both passports just in case. Ryan's parents were present at his initial court hearing, but did not speak with him at all.
Ryan Borgwardt is due back in court on January 13th. He's indicated that he has plans to represent himself in court due to a lack of funds. He told the judge at his initial hearing that he had just $20 left in his wallet. He does still have the option of being assigned a court-appointed public defender. He will likely decide which path to take at this next hearing if he doesn't decide to plead guilty to the charge. There's also a hearing regarding the separation in April.
So at the beginning of this episode, we mentioned we wanted to cover the Ryan Borgwardt case right after covering the Hana Kobayashi case to compare and contrast the details. In Ryan's case, his actions were clearly deliberate, and he's only been charged with a misdemeanor. There was no GoFundMe set up for him, but volunteers did spend a ton of money. The restitution he's potentially looking at paying so far doesn't include any of the volunteer funds or equipment, and his family is obviously broken. Ryan deliberately laid a plan into motion to make it seem like he was dead, wasting resources and the time of investigators, whereas in Hannah's case, she simply walked away from her life. In both instances, families were affected and heartbroken, and will never be the same.
So there are some similarities between the two cases, but there are a lot of differences. When I look at, what Ryan Borgwardt did, this elaborate plan to fake your death. For what? To leave your life, to be rid of your wife and kids so that you can create a new life with this woman in Uzbekistan. I mean, it's so wrong on so many levels. First off, I'm thinking about his family, and it just has to be devastating for his wife, for his kids, to think about, a man that you've been married to for 22 years and that he's willing to go to these lengths to get away. Okay, that's going to be tough on anyone. Same with the kids. But I'm just left with, how selfish this guy was. Obviously, Morf, it was all about him. He didn't care about his family. He didn't care about what people would go through in attempting to locate him or find his body. He didn't care about anything other than what he wanted.
Yeah, and I think there's key differences between his case and Hannah's case. Hannah's case seems like it was sort of a haphazard, last second, unplanned, no real plan at all. Whereas Ryan took specific steps a long time in advance to get ready to do this and to fool his family and police and everyone that would be looking for him. So, and I think we mentioned it's clearly elements of Ryan's plan involved the crime, involved trying to get the police to do something based on false information. So I think that's a key difference in the cases.
But I think a lot of people, are or are going to be upset that, what's really going to happen to Ryan? I mean, this was a misdemeanor charge. So, I mean, what are the ramifications going to be? It's not like he's going to spend a lot of time, if any, incarcerated. Now, he's wrecked his life, but he did that on his own. His family will never be the same. He's never going to be viewed the same as, he was before. He may be wrecked financially, but as far as sanctions imposed on him by the state, I don't think there will be all that much.
And ironically, he got what he wanted. He's away from his family, just not the way he pictured it. And I wonder if there's somebody out there that's willing to pay him for a book or a movie about this case. And it is an interesting story, but you hate to see somebody that did this, was this deceitful, profit in some way from it.
Yeah, you don't want him to reap any benefits, right, for doing what he did. But it could happen. It has happened before. But I guess we'll have to wait and see how things kind of play out. But that's it for our episode on Ryan Borgwardt. If you love the show, but haven't done so yet, take a minute, go out, leave us a 5-star rating. You can leave a review as well. Also, keep telling your friends. Word of mouth about the Criminology podcast really helps us out.
If you want to find us on social media, we're on X with the handle @CriminologyPod. You can also find us on Facebook by going to facebook.com/CriminologyPodcast. And you can join our Facebook discussion group Criminology podcast discussion and fans.
So that's it for another episode of Criminology, our first of 2025. But Morf and I will be back with all of you next week with a brand new episode. So for Mike
and Morf,
we'll talk to you next week.
Take care, everyone, and Happy New Year.